It's interesting that Lewis told Walter Hooper that Grief Observed was not meant to be just random journal entries or jottings, but actually he tried to structure it on the Divine Comedy, where Dante first has to go through the Inferno, and then he goes through Purgatory, and finally he reaches Paradise. And Lewis said that he wanted to use the same structure, that we see this grieving man going further and further down. And literally he reenacts some of the stages of the Inferno. He goes from fear to anger, to almost to blasphemy when he says that God is the great vivisector, the cosmic sadist. And then right at that point he says, I feel like I'm going in circles, but I don't know if I'm going up or down. And right at that point in the narrative, he starts going up. And I believe this represents the transition from the Inferno to Purgatory, the ability, starting to recover and to renounce some of his errors and follies. Another example of how Lewis seems to be talking about his own emotional state, but he's actually working at two levels, is his statement that there's a bolted door. He feels like he's trying to reach toward God, but somehow God has locked him out. And once again, that seems very emotionally true. He says in Grief Observed that sometimes God is very absent in times of trouble when we expect him to be present in times of trouble. But once again, Lewis is thinking of the Inferno. There's a famous scene in which they're trying to proceed in their journey to get through the Inferno and to start their journey upwards toward God. And the door is bolted by demons, by fallen angels, and they don't know what to do. And finally, God sends down an angel, a messenger, and he just waves his hand and the door flies open, and they're able to proceed on their journey. So when he makes that allusion to the bolted door, yes, it's emotionally true, but also that is an allusion to Dante, which is going to help us understand this whole book as a spiritual journey, which will lead eventually to us being able to see God in paradise. Well, I gave the book to my mother when she was experiencing the loss of a friend, and she gave it back and said in 3 words she thought it was candid but not comforting. Maybe that's 4 words. But I thought that was an interesting brief review. As you go back and look at the book, it's very psychologically perceptive, but it's not that spiritually reassuring. And I believe that he was trying to give a journal of his emotional ups and downs during the grieving period. But I wish he'd waited another year to write the book, because the process of spiritual and emotional healing continued. You can see it in his letters. You can see it in letters to Malcolm. So I do think it's comforting in the sense that other people who are grieving could say, oh, he knows exactly what we feel like. It's not quite as comforting in terms of bringing his faith to bear upon how to endure this difficult period in his life. Part of what I enjoy about Grief Observed is it's very emotionally honest, but there's also more artifice than people realize. He was a great lover of Dante's Inferno and the other books in the Divine Comedy. And so you'll come across a seemingly innocent reference to Joy having the mind of a leopard. And certainly it's a compliment to her agility of her thought processes. But it's also an allusion to the beginning of the Inferno, in which Dante would like to proceed to the mountain of God, but there's a leopard barring his way. And I'm quite sure that Lewis chose that animal specifically because Joy's death had become an impediment to his relationship with God. And so we're seeing both the reality of how much he admired her thought processes, but we're also seeing her as a symbol, or her death as a symbol of something that Lewis is going to have to work through if he's going to repair his relationship to God.